Last year, the best places to pick, at least it was thought, were at the very beginning of round one. People wanted the 101, the 102, the 103, and that's why last year in the Flock League, those were the first picks that went off the board after our competition. I think it's going to be different this year. I actually think that the 101 may or may not be one of the worst picks depending on the amount of teams that are in your league. So let me give you my rankings of the best to worst draft slots to choose from in both 12-team leagues and 10-team leagues. We're going to talk about a lot of strategy throughout this entire video. So honestly, if you play in a 10-team league, I would still watch the 12-team section. But starting off tier one, I'm going to have the 106. Now, there are a lot of different reasons I am putting the 106 as the best spot to choose from. Full transparency, I think the way the tiers break, the 111, the 112 may be a little bit more exciting. But what the 106 gives you, that those picks at the very end of round one doesn't, is it gives you the ability to consistently take the best player available and not have to reach on your guy. And you can see this as early as round one, because there's a tier of about 6 players in fantasy drafts at the moment, whether that's Chase, Lamb, Gibbs, Bijan, Barkley, and then Justin Jefferson, or whether that's Gibbs, Bijan, Barkley, Chase, Lamb, then Jefferson. Regardless, some order of those 6 players will probably be the first options off the board in your fantasy football draft. The 106 is going to guarantee that you get at least one of those names. And if you're in a very sharp fantasy football league, you may not have a fun time in the second round. Like for every single one of these draft slots, you'll see I did a mock draft simulation on flockfantasy.com where we had to go up against all the expert bots, and it is very, very tough to find values there. And I ended up reaching on Chase Brown in the second, but then beyond that, you get Lamar Jackson in the third, James Cook in the fourth, DJ Moore in the fifth, Sam Laporte in the sixth, Tony Pollard seventh, Jacoby Myers eighth, Jordan Mason ninth, Keon Coleman in the 10th. But if you're drafting on ESPN, if you're drafting on Yahoo, if you're drafting on Sleeper, I wouldn't be surprised if you actually get a really strong value in the second round falling to you, whether that's AJ Brown, Brock Bowers, Derrick Henry, Drake London. Maybe one of those names will land there at the 207. And if you were to get AJ Brown and you can start your draft off with Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, Lamar Jackson, James Cook, and then have the flexibility through the rest of your draft to adjust to what your league mates are doing, the 106 would be my favorite selection in the Flock League this year. And if I win our competition, that's probably what I'm going to be choosing. Now, the other 2 slots that are very appealing to me are going to be the 111 and the 112. The reason being is, in my opinion, there's a tier of about 14 to 15 top players in fantasy football this year. You have the 6 players we previously mentioned, but then after that, you have Puka Nacua, Christian McCaffrey, Malik Neighbors, Achane, St. Brown, Brian Thomas, Nico Collins, Ashton Jeanty, and Derrick Henry in whatever order that you like. And if you're getting pick 11, if you're getting pick 12, you're going to guarantee yourselves one of those selections. Now, for me personally, I do view like Devon Achane kind of a tier ahead of Derrick Henry. I'd much rather have Nico Collins over Derrick Henry. So the 10th pick is going to be right behind pick 11 and 12 for me. Even though I think you're going to have a much better start through the first 2 rounds if you have picks 11 and 12 as opposed to pick 6. The reason they're not going to be my number one choice is you kind of have to predict what the board's going to do. Because if you're at pick 12, you're going to make your selection and then you're going to have 23 picks between those points. So you may decide to go with Brian Thomas, Nico Collins, and then between picks 13 and the next time you're on the clock in 36, you may have 15 running backs go off the board if your league mates are crazy, and you may be completely boxed out of the position. And then you're sitting there with picks 36, 37 and going, well, my best running back available at this point is Kenneth Walker or James Conner. However, at wide receiver, I could potentially draft Jackson Smith-Njigba or Tyreek Hill. So you are susceptible to runs going against your favor, but because you can just start in, with my opinion, 2 round 1 talents, 11, 12, and even pick 10, all phenomenal options. Now, the next best few selections, in my opinion, are going to be picks 4 and 5, almost for the same reason that you have with pick 6, except the difference with picks 4 and 5 is I don't know if you have the ability to get AJ Brown falling that far. I don't know if you're ever in a draft where Ashton Jeanty falls to the 209. I don't know if you're ever in a draft where Drake London falls to the 209. Now, don't get me wrong. Some draft platforms, the ADP is really messed up. Maybe league mates aren't sharp. Maybe they're deciding to go ahead and take running back like Kyron Williams at the beginning of the second round, giving you Ashton Genty. And then these picks would be phenomenal because you are going to get at least one of the elite 3-down bell cows, whether that's Gibbs, Bijan, Barkley, or one of the alpha wide receivers with Chase, Lamb, Jefferson. But you do have a very flat tier from like the late second round through the beginning of the third round. So the fourth and fifth pick, I don't love the 2-3 turn, but you at least get a fundamental building block at the top, whether that's running back and receiver. And whenever you're determining if you're going to go with the running back or a wide receiver there, it is going to be really dictated based off your league settings, whether you're playing in a half PPR, non-PPR, full PPR league, whether your league has 2 starting wide receiver slots or 3 wide receiver slots, whether your league has 1 flex spot or 2 flex spots. So I highly recommend in your draft making sure that you are using our 2025 draft sheets. I posted 50 different draft sheets. That way you can take one that aligns exactly with your league format and exactly the draft platform that you're playing on, whether that's Sleeper, Yahoo, or ESPN. Just make sure you go to the directory and you can find exactly what sheet that you should be using between the 50 of them. And if you don't have access to those sheets yet, no worries. We got you. The best deal you're ever going to find, $34 on flockfantasy.com. Not only do you get those 50 sheets, you get 4 other draft guides from other creators. Plus, you're going to be getting all of our rankings, both weekly and rest of season, updated every single week until January 1st. Unlimited use of the trade calculator, trade finder, my team's page. Plus, you're going to get the player comparison tool, range of outcomes tool. And if you use code FLOCK, you're going to be getting free start sit questions and free trade questions answered by me in the live streams that we're doing every night. Now, going over to our next selections, we're going to have picks 2 and 3. Picks 2 and 3, maybe if you like love Gibbs or you love Barkley and you're like, I need these guys no matter what. Sure, these are better selections than picks 4 or 5 where you're just kind of getting the end of the tier. But I always want to position myself where I'm selecting at the end of the tier rather than at the beginning, because I know a lot of people are super confident saying like, oh, I'm the smartest person in my league. I know that I can 100% identify what players I should be drafting. For me, a lot of the times it's like, oh, okay, I know these players should kind of be grouped together. I can't tell you for 100% certainty if Gibbs or Bijan Robinson's the better pick. So I'd rather just have whichever one I'm going to get later. And hopefully it means I can get inside one of the other tiers later in the draft. Now, going over to the first pick, if you are in a spot where you are comfortable with the wide receiver early build, this could be higher in these rankings because obviously Jamar Chase would be super exciting to build around. Now, to be completely honest with you, in the Flock League, I may choose the 101 just so I can have the bit where, oh, I had Jamar Chase last year. I'm keeping my guys. I'm going and getting Jamar Chase this year. But I do think it puts you in a really awkward spot in a lot of other sections of the draft. Like if you go ahead and look at the mock draft that we did from the 101, we went like Chase, Jacobs, McBride, Worthy, Terry, and then you're sitting there having to kind of play catch up at running backs in the middle rounds just because you're not getting that absolute hammer at the very top where you are taking Jamar Chase. So if you're in like a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format, I may prefer the elite running back build, which is maybe why I just want to be selecting like 2 through 6. But if you're in a league with multiple flex spots where you can build around wide receiver, especially in a full PPR format, that's where Jamar Chase is exciting. Now going over to pick 7 I think would be very bad. While yes, you get like the flexibility that we talked about with the 6th pick where you can just kind of go back and forth, take best player available. The tiers in the early rounds, you're kind of boxed out. Like there's the tier like 6-ish players at the very top of fantasy drafts. And then if you have pick 7, you're looking at 9 guys in a tier. You could take CMC there. You could take Puka there. You could take Amon-Ra St. Brown, Malik Neighbors, Achane, Genty, Derrick Henry, Nico, Brian Thomas. You could take any of those players and it would be justified. What is pretty confident as well is you're probably not going to get 2 of them. You're just going to get your choice of that tier. The tier's probably going to run off by the time you're on the clock again at the 206. And then you're going to be coming away with a player like A.J. Brown. And don't get me wrong, I like those guys. And I know some people may be interested in why we're not talking about like how these draft picks set you up in round 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And a big reason is when you're in the early rounds of your fantasy drafts, you have a very tight range of where these players are going to get drafted. Like I can tell you that in your draft, unless it's super flex, Bijan Robinson's going to go anywhere from between pick 1 and pick 6. There's no way in hell he goes later than that. And obviously he can't go earlier than pick 1. Now, as you get to like round 7 or 8, like for example, I took Matthew Golden in the 8th round of this draft. I can't tell you if Matthew Golden's going to go at the beginning of the 8th, the beginning of the 7th, the end of the 8th, the beginning of the 9th in your fantasy league. So as you get to those later rounds, where you're selecting from doesn't matter as much. It is nice to kind of be in the middle of the board. That way, again, you can get those players falling to you and you're not going to get absolutely screwed on positional runs. But I think that the tiers are very important at the beginning of your drafts, and pick 7 sets you up in a really tough spot there. And then picks 8 and 9, kind of the same exact thing as pick 7, but you're a little bit closer to the end of the board. So if you're a little bit closer to the end of the board, you have a little less flexibility there as well. But again, you're kind of in a spot where I guess at pick 8, you're most likely not going to get one of those Derrick Henry, Genty, Brian Thomas level players. Pick 9, you're a little more likely, but probably you're just going to be looking at like London, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brock Bowers, Jacobs. And again, those guys aren't too different than what you'd have at the end of the second round. Now let's move over to the 10-team leagues. 10-team leagues are going to be very, very different. Now what's super exciting is if you're in a 10-team draft, you actually can get those elite players all the way into the second round at picks 5 and 6. Like you can actually see in this 10-team league that we draft in, we were able to start off our selection at 5 with Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Josh Allen, George Kittle. And a big thing that I would say in a 10-team league is you are going to see crazy wide receiver values later in drafts. Like in this draft, as an example, Ricky Pearsall, Deebo Samuel, Matthew Golden, Juwan Jennings, Jacoby Myers are all 9th round picks. So I like the idea of getting the elite running backs. I like the idea of getting the elite quarterback and the elite tight end in a 10-team league. Maybe we went a little overboard here. Maybe we wouldn't do that in a real draft, but still you can see how it plays out. And then same thing with pick 6. You're going to be able to get Justin Jefferson and then get one of those very exciting players on the way back. I almost got Christian McCaffrey in round 2 in this instance. Then pick 4, about the same. You're a little less likely to get the Derrick Henry fall. You're a little less likely to get the Christian McCaffrey fall. But here you can still get the elite level tight end like Brock Bowers. And again, if you reference the Flock draft sheets that we put out on flockfantasy.com, you'll see that in a 10-team league with 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, you're highly incentivized to build around the elite tight end and the elite quarterback, given the value over replacement and the percentage of their starting lineup that they're going to account for. And then going over, looking at picks 2 and 3, super important to get the elite level players in a 10-team league. Set yourself up for easy success later in the draft. At picks 2 and 3, you can still get yourself that elite tight end potentially. You can still get yourself that elite level quarterback in round 3. And then when we go down to picks 7 and 8, you're in a spot that's just slightly worse than picks 5 and 6 because you're not going to get Barkley. You're not going to get Bijan. You're not going to get Jahmyr Gibbs. You're most likely not going to get Justin Jefferson. You're not going to get CeeDee Lamb. So picks 7 and 8, you're right back at the same issue that you have in the 12-team leagues where you're having to pick between like McCaffrey, Neighbors, St. Brown, Achane, Puka, Nico, Brian Thomas, Genty, Derrick Henry. Don't get me wrong. It's great that you're going to get 2 of those players, but that's definitely a tier drop from what you have with the top 6. Picks 9 and 10, I like the fact that you're going to get 2 of those players. But again, you're at the very end of the draft board, so you have a little bit less flexibility than what you would if you were selecting in the middle. And I do want to reiterate again that if you are in the middle of the draft, especially in a 10-team league, you're not going to get hit with runs. Like if I'm selecting at pick 5 in a 10-team league, the most ever picks that I have between my selections are 10. So like there can only be so many running backs that go off the board at that point. There can only be so many wide receivers. And then the worst pick in a 10-team league, in my opinion, is going to be coming out of the 1 hole. Obviously, I love Jamar Chase. But if you're drafting coming out of the 1 hole in a 10-team league, there's a 0% probability that you get that like tier 2 of names ending with like Brian Thomas making it all the way to you at the end of the second round. And on top of that, if we're going to look at like the optimized build in a 10-team league, I would typically prefer starting with that 3-down bell cow running back, which the majority of times you're selecting at pick 1, you are just going to take Jamar Chase. Now, if you're using our Flock draft sheets, you'll see 10-team league, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. We are going to exploit the format. We are going to go ahead and reach on Bijan Robinson. We're going to reach on Jahmyr Gibbs. We're going to reach on Barkley, whoever your favorite running back is there. But why would we want the 101 for us to reach on one of those running backs if we can just get the 105 and take them at a value and get a player in tier 2 that we're excited to build around? So I hope this helps you. I am very much excited for the flock draft this week. I will be grinding away mock drafts on flockfantasy.com to get prepped for it. And yes, we determine our draft order on Thursday. We draft on Saturday. Super exciting. And I will be, of course, taking a flock draft sheet to our draft. I'll have it with the clipboard. I'll be crossing players off when they go off the board. But if you want to get a flock draft sheet for your own draft, flockfantasy.com. There's probably one for your exact format. We have 50 different ones. And if you use promo code FLOCK, you're going to get me to answer your start sit questions and your trade questions every night during the live stream this season. And on top of that, you're going to get 4 different draft guides from other creators, all of our rankings throughout the entire year, access to all the tools on the site, all until January 1st, only for a one-time $34 payment. But I appreciate you and really hope I get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.